Hey guys, Ron here. Good evening, everyone. Well, it's evening for me, and man, 54 degrees in Southern California is cold. Shirt, sweatshirt, jacket, and I'm still freezing. I know. What can I tell you? Been born and raised in Southern California, and my blood is thin, so I'm not used to it. To us, this is damn cold, or to me at least, it's damn cold. Most people here are from somewhere else, so it's not as striking, but I'm from here, so I'm rarely, once or twice in my life, seen snow, and haven't seen all that rain. Thank God, I hate rain. Anyway, we hear the guys. Tonight I'm going to be talking about a case that I was really invested in a few years back, and I decided to revisit it. I'm still very interested in it. It's the case of Amanda Knox, and kind of secondarily her less famous co-defendant and her boyfriend of 1 week, Raffaele Solicito. And I'll give you a little background on the case, and then I'll talk about my thoughts on whether I think Amanda in particular, I guess, and Raffaele, but Amanda in particular, were they guilty? Was she guilty? Is she guilty of killing her flatmate, Meredith Kircher, in 2007 in the house that they shared with two other women in Perugia, Italy? All right, let me give you some background and we'll go from there. God, the Christmas lights are up already, and it's not even Thanksgiving. Gee. All right, so let's talk about the case. So Amanda Knox was from Seattle. I believe Amanda's from Seattle. She moved back to Seattle, so I think she's from Seattle. And she decided to go study abroad and go to Perugia in Italy, which had less tourists than Florence. So she ended up in Perugia, which attracts a lot of non-Italian students there. So it's kind of a party town. It's kind of like a university town, thrives with young people there, and seems like a good fit for her. So anyway, Amanda, a little background on Amanda. Amanda Knox was I don't know all about her family. She has, I believe, one sister. Her parents, Etta and Kurt, were divorced, but they certainly came together. And in fact, both of them, I believe, at various times, well, I know Etta did, lived in Italy to support Amanda through the trial. In fact, they both mortgaged their houses to come up with legal defense for Amanda, but that's coming later. So Amanda was kind of free-spirited, lighthearted. She liked to burst out in song, just at the drop of a hat. She was sort of, if she were, 20 years younger, 30 years younger, if she were from her parents' generation, she would have been a hippie. She smoked weed, she partied a little bit, she liked the Beatles, she liked plucking out tunes on guitar, she liked yoga. She was just kind of a free spirit, and in that vein, she moved to, that doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's a little background of who Amanda was. I'm sure she's been changed forever by what happened to her, and probably takes life a lot more seriously, considering, as far as I know, she still gets death threats and a lot of negative comments on social media and other places. In fact, she was getting death threat letters to her mother's house even after she returned to America. Anyway, so Amanda ultimately, and Raffaele Solicito, her boyfriend of, I don't even want to call it boyfriend, they had been seeing each other for, from October 25th they met, and they had been seeing each other until November 2nd, the day that Meredith Kircher, Amanda's flatmate, was found dead. From the night before. So what is that, a week that they knew each other? But they refer to Amanda and Raffaele as boyfriend and girlfriend. Pretty quick, though, for a week. Anyway, where was I? So Amanda moves to Perugia, Italy, and to attend university there. And she finds a house which has 8 bedrooms. There's 4 upstairs, 4 downstairs. It was perfect for university kids. There were 4 women renting the upstairs unit. There was Amanda, and then, who was 20 at the time, Meredith Kircher, who was British student. She moved in about 10 days or maybe 2 weeks after Amanda did. So they didn't even know each other very long. I believe at most they knew each other 3 weeks, a month, before Meredith was unfortunately murdered by Rudy Gaudet. Anyway, and there were 2 other women living in the flat, and I'll call it flat because the Italians evidently use the British term for apartment. We say apartment here in America, obviously, but they say flat. And there were 2 other women, and they were law students, and Italian women, living in the flat in the other 2 bedrooms. And they had boyfriends. They were away a lot, and they were about 7, 8, 9 years older than Amanda and Meredith. So they didn't all hang out together, probably because of the age difference and the cultural difference. They didn't hang out all that much. And like I say, as far as I recall, both of these women spent time with their boyfriends where they lived, so they weren't at the flat all that much. They certainly weren't there the night that Meredith was killed. So they all move in together, and there was actually 4 guys living downstairs, so isn't that perfect? And they did all hang out together. In fact, at the time of her death, Meredith was romantically involved with one of the guys who lived downstairs, but if he ever was a suspect, it was very short-lived. Unfortunately, he unwittingly introduced her to her killer. So we've got the 4 women living upstairs, we've got the 4 guys living downstairs. Like I said, I'm going to tell you the research I've done. Now, admittedly, it's from a very pro-Amanda slant. I'll admit that right there. I was in touch with an author who wrote a book about the case during the case, before the verdicts, and I read her book, and then I was in touch with her, and I've obviously I've read Amanda Knox's book, and seen the documentary that she did, and pretty much digest a lot of information about the case. And like I said, almost all of it has been pro Amanda. So I'll start with that right there, especially the author who had some connection, I read, with her family or with her in the Pacific Northwest. But I don't know exactly what the connection was, other than the book she wrote was pretty pro Amanda. Okay, so they're all living in the flat together. At some point, the guys downstairs, it might have even been the guy, an Italian guy who was, like I say, involved with Meredith in those last couple of weeks, I believe, before her death. They introduce Meredith and, well, all the girls in the flat, Meredith and Amanda, specifically, to a guy named Rudy Gaudet. I believe Rudy Gaudet was from the Ivory Coast in Africa. But he was living there. He was not living in the flat, but obviously he was living there and in Perugia. And Rudy already had a history of theft, of burglaries, breaking in places and presumably selling drugs. I don't know if the girls or the guys knew of Rudy Gaudet's criminal history. I also don't know whether he gave or sold them drugs, in particular marijuana. I'm speculating that he probably did. Evidently, there was a basketball court he would hang out on in the plaza in town, and that area was known for drug dealing. Perugia was not especially the area in which the flat was, where they all lived, was not a great neighborhood. But, you know, when you're 20, when I was 20, I didn't think about those things. You know, you're fearless. But I suspect, as I do with a lot of criminal behavior, that drugs were involved in this case, but only in the periphery. I believe that the connection with Rudy, who, I don't know, maybe they just thought he was a swell guy and generally liked him, but I am suspecting that Rudy was probably dealing, or was a very minor drug connection to the guys, and then maybe to the girls as well after they had met. Although as far as I know, there's no evidence of that. That's my speculation. And it is said that the girls never let Rudy into the flat. he'd hang out with the guys in their basement apartment, but it's reported that the girls didn't want him hanging out with them either because they were creeped out because they knew he, you know, was after one or both of them, particularly Amanda or Meredith, or other reasons. We'll never know. So the women lived together there as flatmates, university students. The guys lived below, and that's pretty much where the guys' involvement ends. So I don't really need to talk about them too much. The four guys that lived in the apartments on the first level of this building. So, like I say, Amanda and Meredith only knew each other a couple weeks. They were slowly getting to know each other. They did socialize a little bit, and Amanda has since tried to deny that there were arguments between them, but the research I did, even before the verdicts on trial, suggest otherwise. Now, they're all heavily favoring Amanda, but who knows? And let me put it to you this way. It is said that this was the time of, and again, this is what I found in my research, this isn't just my opinion. This was happening at the time when George W. Bush was president of the United States. It said that there was a lot of anti-Americanism in Perugia, especially in these liberal college towns. Americans were kind of looked down on, although what's ironic is Amanda Knox is as liberal as they come. I'm sure she was no George Bush fan, but all Americans were sort of lumped together, supposedly. So there's already some implicit bias there towards Americans. Amanda was a free spirit. Like I said, she'd break out into song. She was not a great housekeeper. Apparently she left a sex toy out where the other women found it. And they just generally, and I'm talking about Meredith and Meredith's British friends there in Perugia, being sort of it's reported that at least some of Meredith's friends, and perhaps Meredith herself, were kind of upper crust. They kind of looked down on Amanda, thought she was kind of, let's say, trashy, for lack of a better term. And the Italian women as well. Now, again, Amanda, of course, will never come out and say that because it'll look like she's trashing the victims and involved in self-pity. But that's just the research I've done. And these were, there was multiple interviews conducted, so I just happen to believe there's probably some truth to that. So Amanda was, we want to say, the question becomes, were Amanda and Meredith friends? Were they enemies? Were they frenemies? I think that they were acquaintances. They were roommates. They did socialize a little bit together, but Meredith had her own group of friends, and Amanda dated, or I don't even know, I think dated is a little too, not that I'm judging, but I think dated a little too formal a term, but let's say Amanda hooked up with about half a dozen guys in the short time she was in Perugia, and I'll tell you the reason why I know that. She had to list them all afterwards. Another terrible ploy by the Italian police. But my point is, Amanda was a student. She, like I said, was socializing with guys and with friends she was meeting, and she also worked at a bar called Le Chic, owned by a guy, or run by a guy named Patrick Lumumba. And I believe Mr. Lumumba is Congolese, from the Congo in Africa as well. Another immigrant to Italy, to Perugia. So she's working at Le Chic. She's dating different guys. She has friends. She's obviously, a 20-year-old young woman from America doing the normal social things, and as is Meredith, apparently, but with a different group of friends. And mostly. And on October the 25th, Amanda goes to a classical music concert. And that's what I mean. I mean, she was very eclectic. She liked rock and roll, pop, classic, hip-hop. I mean, she was very eclectic and a very bright person, evidently, who's now a journalist. And she meets Raphael Solicito, who is Italian, and I believe he was originally from Milan. And Raffaele, who I believe is a computer engineer or software engineer now, another very bright guy, I mean, they had, they had the mental thing going. They hooked up. She called him the Italian Harry Potter because that's what he looked like to her. And they immediately hooked up together, and she started spending time at his flat. I don't think Raffaele had roommates, but I'll have to verify that. I don't think he did. But anyway, they cooked together, and our reason in his flat, and that'll come into play later because there was a knife in his flat that was made into the murder weapon later on, erroneously, incorrectly. So on November the 1st, and remember, she had just met Raffaele on the 25th of October. On November the 1st, she meets, November the 1st was a holiday in Italy, and the two Italian women, the other flatmates, they were gone. I believe they were with their boyfriends out of town. And Amanda was, at least, I don't know if she worked that night, but she was certainly, I believe she texted Patrick that she wanted to not work that night and later put see you later. And she spent the night with Raffaele. And Amanda was also learning Italian at this time, and she became actually very fluent. In fact, by the time of her trial, you can see the tape, she was speaking in fluent Italian during her entire trial. So anyway, she spends the night at Raffaele's flat, and she went over numerous times what they did. They had dinner, they watched the movie Amélie on his computer, I believe. They had sex, and they went to sleep. Excuse me, and they went to sleep. Now, at some point the next day, I believe she was there in the morning and then left again. She went back to her place. But at some point later that day, and the point I was making, excuse me, let me go back for a second. The point I was making was that reportedly on that November 1st, the night before, like I said, all the flatmates were gone. Amanda was at Raffaele's place, and the two women with their boyfriends. So purportedly Meredith was hanging out with some friends that night, watched a movie at their place, and came back to her flat alone. And the apartment was alone, obviously. She was the only roommate that was going to spend the night there, around 9 p.m. So at some point later, Amanda comes back, and she discovers an unflushed toilet with stuff in it, which was very disgusting to her and very unlike that any of the women would not flush the toilet there, and blood in the bathroom and bloody footprints. She tried to explain it away like being menstrual blood, but there was just too much. And like I said, the footprints. She called at least one of the flatmates, the Italian women, who didn't know where Meredith was. She called Meredith. Meredith didn't answer, and Meredith always had her phone with her. And Meredith's door was still locked. And then she called Raffaele, and actually she called her mother too. And they tried to break in. She and Raffaele kicked the door in, but they couldn't get in. And she called her mother. Mother, I believe, suggested they call the police, which they did. And the police came by and found Meredith under a duvet cover, dead, sexually assaulted and stabbed to death, or at least looked like she had been sexually assaulted. A bra on the floor, things spread out. And let me tell you, from the beginning, that crime scene was contaminated immediately. It was one of the most botched investigations I've ever seen. I don't think Perugia had a murder in 20 years, which was kind of an appeal to people who wanted to live there. But these guys, really, there was a lot of incompetence going on. So, what else? So, almost immediately, for some reason, Raffaele and Amanda were suspects. And everything from why did Amanda leave La Chic that night and not work? Why did she say? They were misinterpreting texts that she said to Patrick, who I don't believe spoke English. I believe they only communicated, her boss at La Chic, I believe they only spoke in Italian. So they were misinterpreting text because they didn't understand American English and American English casual phrases. So Amanda was almost immediately a suspect and pretty much was immediately a suspect, as was Raphael. And there's those famous pictures of them, hugging and kind of kissing each other while they waited for the police to investigate inside. Now, you know what? To me, that's two people who couldn't keep their hands off of each other. They had just met days, a week earlier. They were in the throes of lust and passion, and she was scared shitless. And she also was thinking at the time that it might have been her. If she were alone in the flat, she might have been murdered. It was confusing. So I don't see anything wrong with the fact that they weren't making out, but there was kissing and hugging and pecks going on. I think it's completely understandable. He was comforting her, she was comforting him. They were confused, she was scared, and probably wondering if they would be involved in this somehow. So, and boy, was she right with that suspicion, if that was a suspicion. So the press started reporting everything they were doing, like saying that she and Raffaele were going to buy lingerie. They bought that at the trial, and that she was parading lingerie in the store. Now, she claims she had been not allowed back in her flat for days, and she was walking around in the same clothes and literally wanted to go buy underwear and change clothes. That she was doing handstands in the police station, which was true. She says the police officer, while he was unofficially interrogating her, kind of the good cop, bad cop thing, that he was asking her he saw her stretching, and she said she did a lot of yoga, and he said, "What can you do?" And she was posing and doing handstands, and she said it was part anxiety, part because this cop asked her to do it. And, a 20-year-old nervous and scared, it can be anything, in my opinion. Also, she claims that she was coerced into making a false confession, that the police kept her starved and awake for like 20 hours and kept on her to confess. And before that, they actually pushed and pushed and pushed her till they made her say, maybe somebody was there, maybe I saw, till they finally said that she finally falsely confessed that she was in the flat, and that Patrick, of all people, Patrick Lumumba, her boss, was the killer. So Patrick immediately gets arrested. They pull him out of his flat. He has a wife, he has children, and he's unfortunately, this poor guy is pulled out of his flat. And then, of course, he's outraged at Amanda, saying, she wasn't the greatest worker, she was flaky, why is she accusing me of this? And that's totally understandable, since he was 100% innocent. So there's the false confession. Ultimately, she and Raffaele are taken to prison. A couple of weeks later, they determine, if it was even, maybe it wasn't even a couple of weeks, they discovered that Rudy Guedet's DNA was in the flat and on Meredith's body, I believe. So Rudy Guedet is correctly arrested for the murder, but they still are holding and charge Amanda and Raffaele. So like I said, Amanda's parents ultimately come, mortgage their homes. The divorced parents come together, and they go out to Perugia and are assisting her in hiring lawyers. And there's tapes of, at least in the documentary, there's tapes of Amanda and her mother talking. And if Amanda's lying, she sure as shit sounds pretty sincere about what happened, what didn't happen, what she knows, what she doesn't know. And the press was trying to paint this, especially the Italian press, as, an American femme fatale, that she was a wild American slut, because that's how American women are, apparently, in the eyes of some Europeans, particularly Italians, particularly during the reign of George W. Bush, who they hated. There was a lot of bias going on here, that Amanda was some temptress. They even went so far as to say, angel face, face of angel, face of death, called her Foxy Knoxy. Now, she claims that Foxy Knoxy was a nickname when she was like 12 years old playing soccer in Seattle. But they used her, that was from her MySpace profile, that she was a sexual temptress. As a matter of fact, the police in Perugia actually told Amanda that she was HIV positive, and that she had to list all of her lovers that she had taken since she had moved to Perugia. And she did, every one of them, and it was a lie. It was just a flat-out lie to terrorize her, I suppose. I mean, if that's not reason enough for an acquittal, I don't know what is. So they terrorized her falsely, and She talks about conditions in the prison in her book, which I won't go into, but it was pretty primitive and bad. It was definitely was not. There was definitely human rights violations. Anyway, so the prosecution said that there was a knife found, Raffaele's kitchen knife, with Meredith's DNA on the tip of the knife and Raffaele and perhaps Amanda's DNA on the handle of the knife. Now, this absolutely confused Raffaele. In fact, between Amanda falsely accusing falsely accusing Patrick Lumumba, her boss at Lashik, and which of course he obviously profusely apologized for, to this day, and Raffaele kind of being wish-washy and saying, well, maybe I think I accidentally pricked Meredith with the tip of the knife when all three of us, me, Amanda, and Meredith, were cooking together. I mean, I doubt that ever even happened, but I think these young kids were just sort of searching for answers to this confusing situation. That's what I believe. Because later, it was found that there was no DNA on the knife. Amanda and Raffaele spent 4 years in prison. Then they were there was a retrial, appeal in 2011, and they were acquitted, and they were sent home, and Amanda came back to the United States. A tearful press conference you can watch online. Then, in absentia, while they were back in the United States, or at least while Amanda was, they were convicted again. And then there was another. They ordered a new trial, and there was another trial, and then they were ultimately acquitted yet again, saying that there was no forensic evidence. So after what was that, 3 trials, no forensic evidence, which is true. So we've got a case here that is 1,000% circumstantial. The suspicion was somehow it was like a conviction in search of a crime. The Italian authorities thought that, like I said, that Amanda was some kind of sexual temptress, and she hated or was jealous of Meredith, and she somehow invited Rudy Guede up, or watched Rudy Guede rape Meredith while the two of them helped out or watched, or some kind of thing that they invented based on, I don't know what, some kind of supposition about crazy wild Americans. And where they got that from, I have no idea. And to my knowledge, Rudy Guede never said that the two of them were involved in the first place, but he never said otherwise, either publicly, although supposedly he confessed to his cellmate in prison that they were not involved. So Rudy Guede was released in 2020. He did 14 years in prison and then ordered to do community service. So 14 years for murder and sexual assault, and he's out. He's out. I wonder if he went back to Germany, because I know he was living in Germany at one time as well. And Amanda and Raffaele actually, several years later, either 2020 or 21, they went, and Amanda with her husband and her baby went and met with Raffaele. And actually, I'm surprised she was not too scared to go back to Italy, and they actually visited a town with Raffaele that they wanted to visit. So Amanda has moved on with her life, become a journalist and an advocate for those wrongly accused. And Raffaele is a professional, and I think he's still living in Italy. So what do I think about this case? Well, there's absolutely zero forensic evidence. Zero. There's zero motive. So it's, like I say, it's not just 100% circumstantial. It's 1,000% circumstantial. If they did it, or if she was involved, or if they were both involved, it's a crime that there's no evidence, zero, there's no witnesses, and there's no motive. So you cannot convict somebody based on that. So then it becomes, do you think she's guilty? My belief is, I do not think she's guilty. I think she had kind of an icy relationship with Meredith. I think she probably wanted Meredith to like her more, but I think that Meredith and her British friends kind of looked down on hippy dippy Amanda, but I think Amanda went with the flow. I think Amanda was just kind of a boy crazy 20-year-old away from home, in Italy. Most young people will probably behave the same way when you're free and away from home. Um, at that time in your life, college age. And I think she just, was keeping busy working with Chic, but not liking it all that much, and was really into Raffaele. And maybe Raffaele would have been the guy of the week, and maybe there would have been another guy. I do not see any violence in Amanda's past. She was not reported to make any threats. There were no apparent confrontations between Amanda and Meredith, or Amanda and the other flatmates. So, bottom line is, I don't think they had anything to do with it. I think the timeline that they've given is what they said. I think that they did what they were best at in the week that they knew each other, which was sex. I think they went back, they cooked together. I think they watched Amelie. I think they went to they smoked some weed, they said. They had sex and they went to sleep. And the next morning, Amanda had to eventually return to her flat. And that's when it all happened. That's when her concern for Meredith, who was not answering the door of her bedroom, became realized. Also, there was glass broken out of Amanda's room, made to look like a break-in, but apparently the glass was on the wrong side. So we'll never know 100% what happened. Which brings me to the next question. So I think Amanda is innocent. I think Raffaele is innocent. I think Rudy Gaudet was the sole killer. Like I said, he was a burglar. He might have been burglarizing the flat, and Meredith might have walked in and caught him. That, I think, is a distinct possibility. He may have, thought the flat was going to be 100% empty that weekend or that night, and Meredith might have unexpectedly walked in and caught him. And maybe he didn't want to go to jail again. He might have broken in the hopes of having sex with Meredith, particularly because she was alone that night. No one was at the apartment. She probably resisted him, and it looks like, based on her clothing, her bra and things, that she did resist him. And that he killed her, for fear of a rape charge. That's what I think happened. I don't think that Raffaele and Amanda had anything to do with it. I think they're innocent victims in this. That's what I think. Certainly changed their lives forever, though. So give me your thoughts on the Amanda Knox Raffaele Solicito case, murder in Italy, Perugia, Italy. I'll be interested in reading them and commenting on them. My name is Ron, by the way, if you haven't already subscribed. If you have, please hit the little bell icon next to the subscription button. The bell icon next to the subscription button, so you're notified as to when I post. And please comment in the comment section, like I said, and please give me likes. That's the most important thing. I'm making pennies on my channel, folks, literally pennies, and I'd like to at least make gas money for these locations I go out to film for you. All right, guys, Ron out. I'll see you at the next location. Bye-bye.